is Father Vogel. We continue our series on St. Francis de Sales' Introduction to the Devout Life. We are in part 3, looking at the virtues, and we've been talking in the last 3 videos about the virtue of humility, and so in this one we will have his last little portion that deals with humility before we continue on in other virtues. So this chapter, he looks specifically, St. Francis does, on how to preserve our good name while practicing humility. Because after those previous chapters, you may wonder, well, we're supposed to humbly endure whatever comes our way, including, somebody may say things that are untrue about us. And so the question may be, is that to be humble, does that mean we have to give up having a good name? Or to be... Well, it's true that humility, he says, doesn't allow us to have a desire to be better than others, to be looked at and preferred as better than other people. So not to seek out that kind of honor and praise. But it says humility does allow us to agree with the book of Sirach from Scriptures that to have care for our good name. Says because our good name is an esteem not of excellence of being greater than somebody else, but only a simple honesty and integrity of life. So a good name is something that is going to be useful to us. Uses an analogy here that a good name is kind of like the leaves of the tree, but the virtues themselves are the fruits. So, trees need to have leaves, but ultimately what we gather from the trees are the fruits, not specifically the leaves. So he says that, having a good name is one of the foundations of a human society, and without it, we're not only useless but harmful to the public because of the scandal it would cause. Charity requires, and humility agrees, that we must desire to have it and preserve it preciously. So, it is good to desire to have a good name and to protect our reputation. And he even mentions in there that it is a kind of duty that we have to keep a good name. So, yeah, it's perfectly in line with this virtue of humility to want to defend or ensure that we have a good name. Though, he also says that we don't want to go about it as though that is the most important thing, as though the leaves are the fruit. Virtue, ultimately, the fact that we're living a virtuous life ought to be better than whether or not people know that we have that. So he says, don't be all that eager and exacting or too formal in preserving our good name. He says, so if we have contempt for those who may insult us or lie about us, he says contempts will ultimately make the virtues that we have vanish. If we come angry, then we might seem to admit the very vices that maybe we're being lied about, that people are thinking that we have, and we confirm it by the way we react to those that lie about us. He says that it depends upon our foundation. Where do we think that our life is founded on? Where does that lie? He compares, another image he uses is the difference between wooden versus stone bridges. He says, a stone bridge is much more sure than a wooden bridge. He says those with a solid Christian spirit generally despise the floods of insulting tongues. Those who feel themselves weak are disturbed at every instance. Philothea, he who wishes to be esteemed by all, loses the esteem of all. So we want to solve, our foundation needs to be the rock that is Christ. So the bridge of our reputation should be stone, built upon that God is the one who preserves us, rather than the thoughts of individual persons in the world. Once again, our reputation is like leaves, but the virtues are the fruit. And even if we were to lose our good name, he says, we are not to leave virtue. We should be jealous, in a sense, for keeping our good name, but not adulterers of that good name. So we want to guard and protect it in a reasonable way, but we don't want it to become an idol, where that's the most important thing, is making sure that everybody knows or looks upon us in that way. So, in order to maintain a good name in a proper way, he said there might be things that we need to give up. He says maybe we have to give up, a certain vain conversation, or a useless practice, a frivolous friendship, or a foolish intimacy, if they end up hurting our good name by being associated in those situations. He says, for a good reputation is better than all kinds of empty satisfactions. If they murmur, grumble, and slander against exercises of piety, growth in devotion, and our progress toward eternal good, let us leave them to bark at the moon. Yes, he says if they're saying bad things about us, even though we're following the devout life, and sometimes people can lie about others, even when that other person is striving to do good, he says, just let them say it. It's as worthless as trying to bark at the moon and expect something to happen. So he says, if we are unjustly blamed for something or lied about, peacefully oppose that calumny, that false claim, with the truth. So we can defend ourselves and point out, no, this is actually what's true. But then he also says that if it lasts, so even after we've defended ourselves, even if this kind of lie continues, he says, let us continue to humble ourselves, thus entrusting our reputation and ourselves into the hands of God. We are solidly set on rock, so it doesn't matter what others may say of us or think of us, if we know that our reputation is founded in God. Ultimately, where we want to put our energy is to serving God, he says, in whether we have good or bad reputation in the eyes of others around us. God bless.